the greatest dangers in life are the ones you don't see coming. The Stoics understood that true destruction rarely comes in the form of an obvious enemy. No, the worst damage comes from something or someone you trust. Some women will destroy your confidence, drain your energy, and shatter your sense of self-worth. And the worst part? You won't even realize it's happening until it's too late. This video will expose the types of women who will slowly weigh you down, leaving you empty, exhausted, and questioning your own reality. Watch until the end, because the final type is the most dangerous of them all. If you find this valuable, like the video, subscribe, and share your experiences in the comments below. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Attention Seeker. She is drawn to the center of every room she enters, as though she's magnetized by any chance to bask in the glow of admiration. From the moment you meet her, it's undeniable, she thrives on external approval. At first, this can seem merely energetic or fun. She's the person who can light up a conversation with her animated stories, sprinkle humor into any gathering, and pivot seamlessly between different social circles. You find yourself intrigued by how easily she draws an audience, whether in real life or on social media. It doesn't feel threatening at the outset. In fact, it can be refreshing to see someone so unabashedly enthusiastic about being the focus of attention. But as you get closer, you begin to sense that what she really wants goes beyond a fleeting compliment or a kind remark. She is sustained by it. Indeed, she craves it relentlessly, and any pause in the flow of admiration causes her mood to sour, compelling her to seek validation wherever it can be found. In the beginning, you feel a certain pride in being associated with someone who commands attention so effortlessly. She appears confident, charismatic, and unapologetically alive. You might even catch yourself gazing at her when she's in her element, telling a story to a group of friends, making them laugh and admire her quick wit, and you think, this woman has such a spark. Yet soon enough, you start seeing how boundless her need for praise truly is. She's not simply confident, she's perpetually fishing for approval, whether by posting meticulously staged selfies on social media or by flirting with acquaintances who eagerly flatter her. Her gaze never lingers on any single source of admiration for too long because she is already eyeing the next. And in this unending pursuit, she seems to lose sight of the genuine bond you might be trying to build. As you invest more of yourself, offering heartfelt compliments, surprising her with thoughtful gestures, and displaying unwavering support, you expect that your devotion will help fill her need for affirmation. Instead, you notice it's scarcely enough to keep her content. A dozen flattering remarks from you are eclipsed by a single like from a stranger on Instagram or a fleeting flirtation from an acquaintance at a party. Your affectionate words, once treasured, quickly fade into the background. She moves on to whoever or whatever can supply her with a fresh burst of attention. It's as if your steady, meaningful validation is drowned out by the louder, more exhilarating hum of external applause. In many ways, her life is akin to a performance. She curates each social media post for maximum impact, selecting only the most eye-catching angles, the most glamorous settings, and the most provocative poses. She captions them in ways designed to elicit compliments, crafting an online persona that demands constant reassurance from friends and followers. Offline, she's equally adept at putting on a show. She might steer every conversation to her own experiences and triumphs, leveraging humor or charm to keep the spotlight on herself. If someone else shares a story that threatens to eclipse hers, she skillfully redirects the focus until all eyes return to her. She needs the limelight not as a temporary thrill, but as a continuous source of validation that reassures her of her worth. You try to interpret her behavior through a compassionate lens. You tell yourself that everyone has insecurities, that some people simply cope by seeking more outward confirmation. However, the deeper you go into this relationship, the more evident it becomes that her appetite for attention outstrips any single person's ability to provide it. You could write her a letter every day detailing why you care for her, complimenting every facet of her appearance and personality, and it would still not satisfy her for long. She's already scanning the horizon for the next wave of admiration, convinced that your devotion, no matter how strong, can't fully fill that void inside her. At times, you try harder to be the center of her universe, dressing in ways she might find more appealing or arranging elaborate dates that you hope will prove your commitment. For a short while, she seems pleased, even radiant with gratitude. Yet, almost as quickly, the glow in her eyes dims, and she's off again, scrolling through her phone for the next dopamine hit of a flattering comment or flirting with someone who gives her the kind of attention that still feels new. The cycle repeats endlessly. It's both exhausting and disheartening, as your earnest efforts appear to vanish into thin air the moment her focus shifts. You soon recognize a sobering truth: it isn't your particular brand of love or devotion that falls short, but rather her internal dependency on an infinite loop of external praise. This dynamic exacts a heavy emotional toll. You grow weary of having to constantly outshine an anonymous array of online admirers or casual acquaintances who shower her with fleeting compliments. You start to question whether you're less appealing, less captivating, or less charming than the strangers who fill her comment sections with heart emojis. Yet a more candid perspective reveals that this isn't really about you at all. Her insatiable hunger for validation is a symptom of deep insecurities that no single relationship can mend. No matter how giving, romantic, or attentive you are, she can't resist the lure of potential new admirers. Your stable presence becomes almost too familiar, lacking the novelty that sparks the rush of fresh acclaim. A Stoic man steps back to evaluate the toll on his mental and emotional well-being. He acknowledges the limits of his control, that he can't single-handedly cure someone's unquenchable thirst for praise. Stoicism teaches the importance of discerning what is within your power and what lies outside it. While you can communicate openly about how her constant need for attention undermines real intimacy, you cannot force her to abandon her pursuit of adoration from the crowd. True connection requires both individuals to be present and committed, focusing on each other's inner qualities rather than chasing perpetual applause. You begin to see that a relationship built on the shifting sands of public approval will never provide the anchoring sense of partnership you crave. She might genuinely enjoy your company, but her priorities lead her to seek widespread affirmation over deep, singular devotion. That's not the sort of balanced, mutual exchange you envisioned. A strong foundation relies on sharing emotional space, opening up vulnerabilities, and trusting that the other person values you for who you are. But with her, every tender moment seems overshadowed by the knowledge that her phone is buzzing with notifications or that she's scanning the room for the next admirer. Ultimately, this external focus prevents true emotional intimacy from taking hold. In time, you realize a profound truth: you shouldn't have to compete for the attention of someone who claims to care about you. The role of a partner is not to constantly validate someone who refuses to be satisfied, nor is it to endure a perpetual contest against the broader world's fascination with her. You may empathize with the insecurities that drive her to seek validation, but you cannot indefinitely supply a wellspring of undivided praise if it's never enough. A genuine bond calls for reciprocity, moments of vulnerability, shared trials, and the kind of closeness that arises from genuinely seeing and supporting each other. That closeness cannot flourish when one partner is eternally preoccupied with the next source of praise. If she continues to chase adoration like a moth circling a bright light, you face a pivotal decision: stay and risk losing yourself in the fruitless struggle to keep her content, or recognize the futility of fighting a battle where the rules ensure you can never win. A Stoic man chooses to maintain his equilibrium, valuing loyalty in both directions. Loyalty means dedicating yourself to a partner who invests in you equally, who sees you not as another notch of praise, but as a companion with whom to share genuine moments of life. You don't need to demonize her or label her as irredeemably selfish. People have their own histories and coping mechanisms, and her need for attention might stem from wounds that only deeper self-work can heal. But if she is unwilling to address the root cause of her constant craving, you risk tethering yourself to someone perpetually on the lookout for the next audience. And in that scenario, your love becomes a mere stage prop in her lifelong quest to be admired. In the final reckoning, a relationship fueled by endless bids for attention will not bloom into a fulfilling partnership. It will remain a performance, a spectacle that demands your participation but never offers the security or depth you need. By stepping away, you choose your own inner peace and dignity. You reclaim the space to find a connection grounded in true reciprocity and respect, one in which each partner's worth is recognized not by the quantity of admirers, but by the quality of devotion they bring to each other's lives. Chapter 2. The Commitment Phobe. She lives in a haze of uncertainty, carefully orchestrating a relationship that sits forever in a no-man's land between casual and committed. When you first encounter her, it seems like she's ready to open the door to something meaningful. She drops tantalizing hints about future adventures and things you could do together, allowing you to imagine the two of you as partners in a beautifully unfolding story. You see glimmers of warmth in the way she laughs at your jokes, the way she holds eye contact just a moment too long, or the way she traces her fingers along your hand when you say goodbye. Yet there's always that subtle barrier, that air of incomplete devotion, warning you not to assume she's ready to anchor herself beside you. Her favorite environment is the gray zone, where she can flirt with the idea of commitment but never truly commit. She supplies you with a steady drip of possibility. Maybe someday you'll take that trip she keeps mentioning. Maybe next month she'll have clarity about her feelings. Maybe after the next holiday season she'll finally introduce you to her family. In all these discussions, she never outright refuses to be with you, but she never steps decisively forward either. Instead, she wavers in a fog of indecision, drawing you in with promise yet constantly slipping through your grasp. You can't help but cling to the idea that this is just a phase, that she's complicated, that she needs patience. You think, perhaps if you show her enough affection, stability, and understanding, she'll relax her guard and finally confirm what you've believed all along, that there is real love here waiting to bloom. But as time marches on, the truth grows harder to ignore. Whenever you take a bold step, maybe you try to discuss defining the relationship or plan a significant trip together, she seems to recoil. Suddenly, her schedule is overrun with obligations, her phone calls become sporadic, and her messages contain fewer affectionate remarks. Even when she does respond, her tone shifts to a cautious neutrality, as though she's reminding you that you have no real claim on her. Should you press for clarity, she'll slip into vague explanations about her fears, her not being ready, or her uncertainty about where life is taking her. You find yourself trapped in an endless circle of half-answers, forced to interpret each cryptic word like a puzzle that, no matter how many times you rearrange the pieces, never forms a complete picture. In rarer moments, she snaps back to the enchanting version of herself, painting vivid daydreams of the vacations you'll take, the new foods you'll try, or the life milestones you'll achieve side by side. Maybe she texts you late at night, suddenly inspired to talk about how wonderful it would be to eventually move in together or adopt a puppy. In these fleeting intervals, you think you see the real her, someone who might just be wrestling with old fears and needs more time. Your own heart leaps in excitement at the notion that she's coming around. You hold on to this glimmer of hope like a lifeline, convinced that one day soon she'll say, "Yes, let's make this official." Yet these bursts of enthusiasm are almost always followed by a cool-down period. She might ghost you for days, claiming she got busy or was going through a stressful time. She might shrug off your attempts to follow up on those grand plans, mumbling that she's not sure right now. Her mood swings become the waves that toss you around. One day, she's brimming with romantic talk and leaning against your shoulder. The next, she's aloof and distant. You wonder if you've done something wrong, if you've smothered her with too much affection, or if you haven't done enough to prove you're a safe bet. In your head, you replay every interaction, trying to spot the moment you might have pushed her away. The sadness and confusion can gnaw at you, sapping your energy. And still, she keeps you close enough that you never entirely lose hope. She'll reach out just when you're teetering on the edge of walking away, offering a sweet message or an invitation to get together. This is the push and pull dynamic she thrives on, allowing her to reap the emotional benefits of your interest and devotion, without granting you the solidity of a committed relationship. For a while, you might rationalize her behavior, telling yourself that she's simply a free spirit or that she's guarded because of past heartbreak. But in your quieter moments, you suspect a deeper truth. She's not a lost soul needing rescue. She's someone who relishes the freedom of non-commitment while enjoying the attention and effort you bring. Inevitably, this dance exacts a toll. You find yourself in a perpetual holding pattern, waiting for a moment of decisiveness that never comes. The relationship begins to overshadow other areas of your life, as you invest enormous mental space trying to read her emotional temperature, predict her next move, or decode her hints. You may pass on opportunities, social events, personal goals, because you're caught in her uncertain orbit, hoping you'll finally receive a definitive yes. You might tie your emotional state to hers, feeling uplifted when she's momentarily affectionate and destabilized when she withdraws. The more time passes, the more anxious you become, afraid that if you press for answers, she'll flee for good, but equally aware that continuing without clarity is draining you. Sometimes, you try confronting the issue head-on. You lay your feelings on the table, explaining that you can't remain in limbo indefinitely, that you crave a relationship with a sturdy foundation. She may respond by either shutting down entirely or offering another layer of excuses. Perhaps she isn't emotionally ready, or she hates labels, or she has too many responsibilities right now. Ultimately, these justifications can go on forever because they don't stem from a legitimate desire to work through fears and eventually commit. They are techniques to maintain the status quo. If you threaten to walk away, she might employ a quick burst of affection or vulnerability, but it usually lacks the follow-through necessary to evolve the relationship. It's at this point you start to see how illusory it all is. You recall the warm conversations about traveling the world and sharing a life, but notice how no real steps have been taken toward any of those visions. You look back at the countless days or weeks that have slipped by without progress, realizing that if she truly wanted to move forward with you, she would have found a way by now. Excuses like "I'm not sure, I just need time," or "I'm not ready yet" become transparent masks for someone who simply doesn't want to commit but can't bring herself to say it outright. A Stoic man observes these patterns without descending into endless self-blame. He recognizes that genuine affection leads to clarity and forward motion, not perpetual uncertainty. In a healthy bond, you don't have to beg for commitment or constantly prove your worth. Both parties are drawn together by a mutual desire to build something lasting. That doesn't mean there won't be nerves, hesitations, or discussions about timing, but the default stance in a real relationship is an eagerness to grow closer, not a habitual dance of evasion. He also sees that life is finite, and he values the resource of time too much to squander it on someone who thrives in ambiguity. If every conversation about the future results in half answers, if every attempt to define the relationship ends with her retreating behind a wall of vagueness, then the writing is on the wall. She prefers the dance over the destination. Rather than continuing to chase a ghost of commitment, a Stoic man accepts that some individuals genuinely don't want to be tied down. Their priorities, emotional maturity, or life plans do not align with building a stable partnership. Once this becomes evident, there is little point in staying on the roller coaster of her mixed signals. He acts with respect for both himself and her by not pretending the situation is anything other than what it is. He doesn't rage against her uncertainty or try to coerce her into wanting more, because he knows that love can't be forced into existence. Instead, he steps back and preserves his dignity. If she's perpetually uncertain, that very uncertainty is her answer. The heartbreak or sadness of recognizing the truth pales in comparison to the exhausting limbo of existing in her realm of half-commitments. Over time, he sees how precious his emotional energy is and refuses to invest it in a cause that only yields heartbreak and confusion. The lesson is straightforward yet profound. If a woman wants to build a future with you, she'll show it through consistent actions, not just words. She'll embrace growth, discuss the challenges openly, and express her fears in a way that invites you to stand by her side. She won't lure you in with visions of maybe someday, and then vanish whenever you take a step forward. She won't keep you guessing about her intentions. Genuine connection paves the way for two people to blend their lives, to make tangible plans, and to trust that the other's presence is real and dependable. When that trust is absent, and you're left perpetually guessing, you're not actually on the path to love, you're stranded in a carefully cultivated mirage. In the end, a Stoic man values serenity and truth above clinging to illusions. He can have immense empathy for whatever past experiences have shaped her fears, but he also honors his own well-being. If she consistently dodges the chance for deeper intimacy, he recognizes that she's making a choice, conscious or not, to remain uncommitted. Accepting this reality liberates him to walk away and direct his life's energy toward someone who is prepared to invest in genuine closeness. It might sting initially, but there's an undeniable release in knowing he's no longer trapped in a never-ending cycle of false starts and unfulfilled promises. From that vantage point, he can look back and see how illusions of maybe someday kept him tethered to something that wasn't truly there. He grasps the Stoic notion that illusions, no matter how comforting, are emptier than any painful truth. By releasing the weight of someone else's indecisiveness, he reclaims his emotional freedom. He reaffirms to himself that love, when real, is a clarifying force. It draws two people together with sincerity and eagerness, leaving no place for indefinite doubt. And in trusting that principle, he opens the door to a relationship that will offer reciprocal devotion, shared purpose. Chapter 3. The Victim. There are people who seem to carry an atmosphere of perpetual gloom wherever they go, and she is one of them. Long before you meet her, she has already cultivated a belief that life has singled her out for misfortune, and she narrates her experiences in a way that places her at the receiving end of a grand conspiracy. If you spend enough time listening, you'll hear how she was betrayed by former friends, sabotaged by callous bosses, and deceived by past partners. In her recollections, she is consistently the wronged party, the victim of cruel twists of fate, and she never once considers the possibility that her own choices or behaviors played any role in her hardships. The world is cruel, other people are malicious or neglectful, and she alone deserves unending sympathy for her plight. Initially, you can't help but be moved by her stories. Like anyone hearing what sounds like a litany of injustice, you feel compassion. Most of us know what it's like to be misunderstood or mistreated, so you might see her as a kindred spirit who simply needs support. Perhaps you imagine that you can help her see life from a more hopeful angle, that your empathy could provide the solace she's been seeking. You might admire what appears to be her resilience. After all, she's been through so much and has survived each time, hasn't she? Yet the deeper you wade into her narrative, the more you sense that her resilience is actually an unwavering commitment to seeing herself as the eternally injured party. All roads lead back to her suffering, and the sympathy you offer only reinforces her self-perception that she is forever unlucky and forever wronged. Even simple, day-to-day matters eventually carry the same victim-tinted hue. If she wakes up late for work, it's because her roommate was noisy or the alarm clock was faulty, never because she went to bed late or neglected to set it correctly. If she misses a deadline, her excuse involves incompetent coworkers or unfair expectations. If she quarrels with a friend, that friend is inevitably the one who started it, who is jealous, toxic, or unhinged. In her world, personal accountability rarely exists, and any suggestion that she examine her own actions is met with defensive indignation. It's almost surreal how every mishap, big or small, is traced back to someone else's wrongdoing, leaving her perpetually absolved of any share in the outcome. Over time, you notice your role shifting from empathetic listener to emotional dumping ground. Her stories become a daily script of grievances, and your task seems to be to nod understandingly, confirm how unfairly she's been treated, and never hint that she might bear some responsibility. The moment you show the slightest skepticism, perhaps suggesting that there could be another side to the story, she accuses you of betrayal or claims you simply don't understand. You might begin tiptoeing around her insecurities, afraid that if you offer even mild counterpoints, you'll be painted as yet another villain in her ever-expanding cast of persecutors. Eventually, your own sense of emotional equilibrium starts to wobble. Each conversation drains you, as if her endless parade of grudges and disappointment siphons the energy right out of you. You might try to help, to propose solutions that could ease her burdens. Maybe you suggest she talk to a therapist, reevaluate her approach to friendships, or take small steps toward personal growth. But she swiftly rejects these ideas or half-heartedly agrees and then does nothing about them. In truth, she isn't looking for practical solutions. She is looking for perpetual validation of her self-designation as someone who is fated to suffer. Even if you somehow resolved one of her major conflicts, she would almost certainly discover a new crisis, a fresh injustice, to fill the void. Her need to be pitied is like a funnel that can never be filled, always demanding more reassurance. The moment one problem is temporarily resolved, another emerges, as though adversity trails her like a persistent shadow. In time, you come to recognize that her emotional repertoire hinges on a cycle of blame and despair. The cast of villains in her story might shift: a rude coworker, a backstabbing friend, a controlling family member, but she retains her role as the primary casualty. You, meanwhile, become an unwilling observer to an unending drama. On the days when you try to break free from this loop, perhaps by pointing out that her narrative seems to omit her own agency, she reacts sharply. Rather than hearing your perspective, she demands unwavering sympathy. Or worse, she concludes that you've taken the side of those who have hurt her, which only confirms her suspicion that no one in the world truly supports her. And so, any hint of accountability or constructive dialogue collapses under her insistence that she is unequivocally the victim. As this pattern grows more entrenched, you may feel an uneasy sense of responsibility for her emotional well-being. You might catch yourself second-guessing your own actions, wondering if you somehow contributed to her negative outlook. You might start avoiding certain topics or altering your own behavior just to keep her from spiraling into another torrent of self-pity. Perhaps you invest extra effort to plan uplifting experiences or surprise her with thoughtful gestures, hoping these moments will help her see the world or you more positively. Yet, to your dismay, every silver lining is quickly overshadowed by a new complaint. If the meal you cooked isn't perfect, it becomes another chapter in her saga of disappointment. If your effort to comfort her doesn't align with her immediate mood, she accuses you of being insensitive. Her negativity is so pervasive that it seeps into your own mind, making you question the viability of the relationship and, sometimes, your own sanity. Eventually, you notice how your life seems to revolve around managing her emotional climate. You adapt your daily routine to cater to her shifting moods, and you find your own joys stifled as you struggle to anticipate what fresh turmoil might arise. Maybe you start censoring your own successes because you fear it will trigger her envy or disapproval. Her victimhood can be a jealous force. If you mention a triumph at work or a fun evening out with friends, she might respond with an offhand remark about how lucky you are, implying she never received such fortune. In this way, even your happiest moments feel tainted by her cynical worldview. You slip further into a state of constant vigilance, worried that the slightest oversight on your part will be exaggerated into the next great betrayal. Yet for all your determination to help, you begin to see the grim reality: she doesn't want the help you offer. Consciously or not, she cultivates her victimhood as a shield against introspection. Facing the possibility that she has a hand in her problems would require her to reassess how she engages with people and to acknowledge that she's not always an innocent bystander. This kind of self-awareness is profoundly uncomfortable for someone who has spent years fortifying the belief that everyone else is responsible for her suffering. Consequently, your attempts at gentle honesty or encouragement for self-reflection are met with resistance or even hostility. What she truly wants is a chorus of agreement that she has been done wrong at every turn. Any divergence from that chorus is labeled as betrayal. For a Stoic man, the weight of another person's constant blame and negativity is more than a simple inconvenience. It's a direct assault on his psychological equilibrium. Stoicism encourages taking responsibility for one's emotions and actions, recognizing where you have influence and where you do not. A victim mindset clashes fiercely with such principles, as it dissolves any trace of personal agency and places all power in the hands of an ever-rotating cast of external persecutors. If you allow yourself to be entangled in her perspective, you risk losing sight of your own capacity for reason, growth, and peace. Over time, her relentless lamentations can fog your own outlook, dragging you into patterns of guilt or frustration that do nothing but sap your energy. Each day spent in her labyrinth of blame is a day removed from cultivating your own serenity and aspirations. In the broader sense, love, true, constructive love, demands that both individuals see themselves as accountable beings, capable of mistakes, growth, and redemption. It flourishes on the foundation of humility and mutual respect, where each partner is willing to examine how they contribute to the relationship's dynamics. But with someone who worships at the altar of her own victimhood, that kind of reciprocal effort is nearly impossible. Instead of being a companion on life's journey, she lingers in a personal tragedy that she replays incessantly, expecting endless pity as the price of your companionship. What starts as empathy on your part can quickly become emotional servitude, draining and degrading you without offering genuine closeness in return. Eventually, you might wonder how you arrived at such a state, agonizing over how to shield her from life's inevitable disappointments while also preserving a shred of your own sanity. You may question whether leaving is the morally correct choice. After all, you once believed you could be her supportive partner, a beacon of stability in her stormy life. But as time goes on, it becomes clear that your support is never enough because she isn't pursuing real solutions or seeking to evolve beyond this pattern. She's chasing validation of her perpetual victimhood. Meanwhile, you are expected to feed her narrative indefinitely, supplying reassurance and sympathy that only serve to strengthen her resolve to blame the world. At this junction, a Stoic man examines the situation with a calm but honest lens. He asks himself if continuing to absorb the brunt of her negativity honors his values of self-discipline, reason, and personal accountability. He recognizes that while compassion is a virtue, enabling someone's unproductive, blame-oriented worldview contradicts true compassion. It merely keeps them stuck. Moreover, it erodes his own emotional well-being, turning his life into a crisis management station for problems that seldom have genuine resolution. The Stoic approach is not cruelty or dismissal, it's clarity. It's the understanding that no amount of external support can mend a mindset that actively refuses self-examination. Ultimately, she is not seeking love in the transformative sense, where love propels both partners to grow and become better versions of themselves. She is searching for a perpetual caretaker in her own tragic opera, someone to applaud her role as the misunderstood heroine and to become, inevitably, the scapegoat when she needs a new target of blame. If you stay enmeshed in her sphere, you risk becoming yet another chapter in her drama. She'll lament how you failed her at some juncture, how you didn't give her the unwavering allegiance she demanded, and how you got, like all the rest, turned out to be just another person who did her wrong. A Stoic man, valuing inner tranquility and integrity, understands that this is a no-win scenario. he stands firm in the knowledge that personal accountability is a cornerstone of meaningful change, and if she rebuffs any invitation to examine her own role in her troubles, there is little you can do to alter her trajectory. It's not your duty to rescue someone who is unwilling to rescue herself. By choosing to preserve your peace and disengage from her endless blame game, you affirm that your compassion has limits that protect your mental health and honor your convictions. When you walk away from such a scenario, you do so not out of spite, but out of a profound recognition that genuine partnership cannot thrive in a one-sided vortex of self-pity. You remove yourself from the role of being just another prop in her victim narrative, freeing up your life for healthier connections grounded in reciprocity and self-awareness. She may label you a traitor, just like all the others who abandoned her, but that is a reflection of her own resistance to accountability rather than a statement about your character. In the end, no amount of sympathy can compensate for her refusal to address her own self-sabotage. True empathy includes respecting not only another person's struggles, but also your own boundaries, acknowledging that you cannot fix someone unwilling to fix themselves. By stepping away, you uphold the Stoic principle that a life of virtue and inner peace cannot be sustained in an environment perpetually fueled by blame and denial. You also open the door to relationships where both individuals embrace their capacity for growth, understanding that neither one is perpetually the villain or the victim. And that, in the grander scheme, is what genuine love and respect truly entail. Chapter 4: The Insecure Clinger. In the beginning, being the gravitational center of someone's emotional universe can ignite a heady mix of excitement and flattery. You wake up to a dozen affectionate texts, each one reaffirming how much you mean to her, and you drift off to sleep hearing her tentative voice asking, "Are you sure you love me?" There's an almost intoxicating pull to such unwavering focus, especially if you've never felt so seen or valued before. Yet beneath this apparent devotion lies an ever-present tremor of anxiety. She's not just clinging because she adores you, she's doing so out of an unending fear that you might vanish. Over time, you realize that it doesn't matter how consistently you reassure her, your words provide only fleeting comfort before she lapses back into uncertainty, searching for more proof of your commitment. If you're not vigilant, you risk finding yourself in a constant scramble to quell her doubts and mitigate her panic, as though your relationship is defined less by mutual growth and more by non-stop crisis management. As the days and weeks pass, the patterns of her insecurity begin to crystallize. You notice that every small gap in communication, every unanswered call, prompts a torrent of anxious speculation. She might fire off messages demanding to know where you went, who you're with, and why you didn't answer the instant she reached out. A simple grocery run can stir her insecurities. "Why did you take so long? You must have been ignoring me." If you mention meeting a friend for lunch, she might pepper you with questions about whether that friend matters more to you than she does. Her distress usually sounds disproportionate to the situation. Sometimes it's downright irrational, but in her worldview, any absence or perceived slight confirms her darkest fear that you're edging away from her orbit. It's as though she's perpetually braced for abandonment, and even routine obligations, like focusing on your work or hobbies, become fresh evidence that she's about to be left behind. In the initial phase of such a relationship, you might not fully grasp the implications. You recall times in your own past when you, too, worried about losing someone you deeply cared for. You relate to the universal vulnerability of love, reminding yourself that most people have insecurities. So you express compassion, patiently responding to her concerns. You text her back quickly, reassure her you're not going anywhere, and arrange frequent calls so she knows you're thinking of her. You assume that once she feels genuinely safe, her anxieties will recede. And for fleeting moments, it can appear as though your extra attention settles her fears. She'll thank you, tell you how wonderful you are, maybe even light up with relief. But that reprieve is short-lived. In the next hour or the next day, she'll detect another threat, be it a delay in your reply or a chance mention of an old friend, and you'll be back in damage control mode, convincing her again and again, that she remains your top priority. Over time, you begin to realize that no single gesture, no matter how heartfelt, is enough to fill the void in her sense of security. A lavish date might soothe her restlessness for an evening, but by the next morning, she's wondering why you didn't text her right after you both got home. A heartfelt declaration of love might calm her trembling spirit for a moment, only for her to spiral again if you happen to glance at your phone during dinner. The breadth of her clinginess extends into every facet of your shared life, errands, weekend plans, social engagements, even private moments where you simply want solitude or mental space. All of it can be construed as you pulling a weight if you're not constantly on guard, anticipating how she might interpret each action. Gradually, you find yourself sacrificing more and more personal freedom to appease her insecurities. The dynamic transitions from romantic warmth to a vigilant tightrope walk in which your main task is to ensure she doesn't tip into another wave of panic. It's not that you lack empathy. You see her vulnerability, perhaps she's been hurt before, or there's an old childhood wound that shaped her worldview. She might confide in you about an ex who abruptly left, or a family that was never emotionally available. Such stories break your heart. You want to be the safe harbor she never had, so you respond with an outpouring of care. You try to neutralize triggers, to be more transparent, to share your schedule or check in frequently so she never feels blindsided. On a good day, it seems your efforts are paying off. She'll gush about how she trusts you more than she's ever trusted anyone. You might think, we're finally getting there. But the next day, or the next minor misunderstanding, that fragile trust crumbles like a sandcastle in a storm. Her recurrent meltdown is a stark reminder that her insecurities aren't the kind you can soothe with gentle words alone. They're deeply rooted, branching into every corner of her psyche. Unless she acknowledges this fundamental issue and works on it herself, you'll remain trapped in a cycle of attempts to prop her up, only to watch her anxiety surge back, demanding more emotional labor from you. All the while, the erosion of your own life unfolds almost imperceptibly at first, then accelerates. You find yourself declining invitations to spend time with friends because you don't want to trigger her jealousy or her sense that she's being abandoned. Hobbies that once gave you joy get sidelined because she claims to feel lonely or neglected when you focus on them. Even your work or personal growth might take a hit if she expresses resentment about how your job pulls you away from her too often. Over time, you realize you're relinquishing crucial parts of yourself, not out of resentment, initially, but out of a heartfelt desire to prove your devotion. Yet each concession, far from granting lasting peace, leads to another demand. The closeness she craves becomes suffocating, not because you dislike intimacy, but because it's laced with fear and frantic need rather than genuine connection. Amid this spiral, you might start to question whether you've somehow contributed to her insecurity. Did you say something in a thoughtless manner? Did you fail to express how important she is on a particularly busy day? Your attempts at self-reflection can quickly morph into self-blame when you're dealing with someone who is perpetually on the brink of emotional crisis. She might even feed into that doubt, saying things like, "If you really cared, you'd understand why I'm anxious," or "I only act like this because you make me feel uncertain." It's a subtle form of emotional manipulation, though it may not always be intentional on her part. She's so consumed by her terror of being left that any reflection on her own role in the dynamic feels impossible. Consequently, the responsibility of maintaining equilibrium is placed squarely on your shoulders, leaving you doubting your own instincts and capacity to establish healthy boundaries. Eventually, the weight of this dynamic can't be ignored. You start to experience moments of frustration or even resentment, questioning why you're putting in so much effort without seeing any real progress. Simple tasks like responding to an email at work or taking a relaxing shower become acts of rebellion because they're moments you're not devoting to reassuring her. You might still care for her deeply, but a gnawing sense of depletion grows. The relationship that once felt like an intimate cocoon now feels more like a labyrinth of anxiety triggers, each requiring careful navigation. You're expected to be part partner, part therapist, with your own emotional reserves perpetually at risk of running dry. In an attempt to lighten the load, you might suggest she widen her support network or consult a mental health professional. You gently propose that she talk to a close friend, join a support group, or see a therapist about her fear of abandonment. But these suggestions, no matter how kindly phrased, can feel threatening to someone so tightly wound in insecurity. She might interpret them as proof that you see her as a broken or that you're trying to push her away. She might feel that involving anyone else would only confirm her worst nightmare, that she's not good enough for you to handle. As a result, even the smallest boundary you set, like turning your phone off for an hour to focus on a project, can spark a storm of tears and accusations. In her mind, boundaries are tantamount to rejection, so she fights them with every emotional weapon at her disposal. It's in these moments that a Stoic perspective can be a life raft. Stoicism doesn't encourage detachment out of coldness, it advocates a clear understanding of what you can and cannot control. You can control your willingness to listen, your compassion, and your own emotional responses. You cannot control her choice to interpret every hiccup as a catastrophic sign of imminent abandonment. You can't eradicate her deep-seated insecurities by sheer force of will. Once you recognize these limits, the moral weight lifts a little. You realize it's neither your fault nor entirely your responsibility to rescue her from her fears. Stoicism helps clarify that a sustainable relationship is one in which both parties take ownership of their own emotional well-being, coming together in partnership rather than one person perpetually tending to the other's wounded psyche. At the same time, empathy remains crucial. You likely understand that she isn't choosing to be anxious just to torment you. Her insecurities may have legitimate origins. Yet empathy without boundaries can morph into codependency, where you lose sight of your own emotional needs because you're so entwined in hers. A relationship built on such uneven footing rarely stands for long, because the caretaker partner, in this case, you, inevitably hits a breaking point. You might snap or become numb, distancing yourself not just from her, but also from your own sense of love and warmth, simply to survive the emotional onslaught. It's a tragic outcome for both parties. She feels more abandoned, and you feel guilty or resentful, locked into a pattern that erodes any chance at genuine closeness. One of the greatest misconceptions about love is that it means unconditionally absorbing another person's turmoil indefinitely. Real, healthy love can involve phases of intense support when one partner is going through a crisis, for instance, but it cannot flourish in a perpetual state of emergency. The insecure clinger, however, lives in permanent crisis mode, believing that any break in your attention might portend disaster. This stasis paralyzes mutual growth. Instead of exploring new shared experiences or supporting each other's aspirations, the relationship circles around her anxiety like a planet stuck in a gravitational loop, never free to explore the broader universe of what you both could become. If you reach the point where her anxiety dominates your every decision, what you wear, how you spend your free time, which friends you see, even how you speak or text, then you're living under an emotional dictatorship, however unintentional it might be on her part. Your sense of personal autonomy dwindles. You might catch yourself telling white lies about your whereabouts just to keep the peace, or taking secret breaks from your phone because you dread the onslaught of questions. Over time, this erodes your sense of honesty and authenticity, two cornerstones of any meaningful partnership. Without authenticity, genuine intimacy fades, replaced by a careful, strategic approach to communication aimed solely at avoiding her panic. You become more of a caretaker or guardian than a loving partner who gets to share your own vulnerabilities and joys. Eventually, the question arises, what does it mean to truly care for someone who is drowning in insecurity? Does it mean giving them every ounce of your emotional bandwidth until you're emptied out? Or does it mean acknowledging that there's a limit to how much another person's turmoil should dictate your life? A Stoic lens helps refine this dilemma, reminding you that true compassion includes preserving your own well-being so you can remain a stable presence for yourself and for anyone you choose to support. Perpetually neglecting your needs in an attempt to appease someone else's bottomless anxieties only ensures that two people become unstable, not just one. Sometimes, this realization prompts a critical decision. You either must set firmer boundaries or extricate yourself from the relationship altogether. If you choose to address the matter directly, you might sit her down and say something like, "I care for you deeply, but I'm also a person with my own needs, responsibilities, and limitations. I can't constantly prove my love through 24/7 reassurance. I need you to meet me halfway by working on yourself, possibly with professional support." Such a declaration can feel terrifying because you're effectively shining a light on her biggest fear, that you might indeed leave if she continues in this way. But if she refuses to confront her own behavior, then the status quo remains, her relentless insecurity overshadowing every aspect of your bond. In certain cases, the only path to preserving your emotional health is to end the relationship. This is a painful decision, not one made lightly or without guilt. You may feel like you're abandoning a wounded person, but the truth is that no genuine healing can occur if she's unwilling to do the internal work. Staying in a dynamic that steadily depletes you isn't altruism, it's slow-motion self-destruction. Paradoxically, leaving may be the jolt she needs to realize how unsustainable her behaviors have become. Or, conversely, she may just shift her anxious clinginess onto someone new. Either way, you're no longer enmeshed in a scenario where your emotional health hangs by a thread. Beyond the immediate consequences, releasing yourself from such a relationship opens the space for growth for both you and her, should she choose to pursue it. You reclaim the mental bandwidth that was constantly devoted to managing her fears, reintroducing yourself to the passions, interests, and friendships that atrophied under her needy gaze. You rediscover the richness of life outside a bubble of hypervigilance, where you can spend hours in thought, creativity, or social engagements without being tethered to your phone or your partner's emotional demands. And crucially, you restore the possibility of entering a healthier relationship in the future, one founded on balance, give and take, rather than an endless chase to quell unceasing anxieties. To be clear, none of this negates the reality that she might genuinely love you to the best of her ability. Her clinginess stems from deep-seated wounds, not a malicious desire to control or harm you. Yet love alone cannot sustain a relationship when it's relentlessly overshadowed by disproportionate fear. For a partnership to thrive, each person must bring their own emotional resources to the table, recognizing that while you can offer solace or encouragement, you can't carry another person's psyche entirely on your shoulders. The insecure clinger often forgets this vital principle, placing the burden of her every anxiety squarely on your shoulders, leaving little room for the shared joy, adventure, and evolution that define a genuinely fulfilling bond. Thus, a Stoic man navigates this territory with both empathy and self-awareness. He neither demonizes her nor condemns himself for failing to fix her insecurities. He assesses the situation realistically, accepting that her transformation can only occur if she actively pursues it. He pays attention to the toll on his well-being, recognizing that an unending climate of emotional panic is corrosive, no matter how strong his good intentions. Setting and maintaining boundaries, or even walking away if necessary, becomes not just an act of self-preservation, but also a stand for the kind of relationship he believes in, one rooted in mutual respect, independent growth, and love that flourishes in the sunlight of shared strength, rather than the storm clouds of perpetual fear. In the end, a healthy relationship fosters growth, freedom, and emotional security for both parties. It allows each partner to maintain individual identities while merging lives in a supportive, inspiring partnership. When clinginess spirals into the kind of dependence marked by incessant worry and constant demands for proof of love, it strangles that natural blossoming. Instead of being a warm, supportive haven, the relationship becomes a cage forged by anxiety. And you, caught in this cage, may realize that staying locked inside helps neither you nor her. Far from being selfish, choosing to exit or set stricter limits is often the bravest, most loving act possible, an affirmation that real love must also allow space to breathe, to grow, and to stand on one's own. Without such space, there can be no healthy balance, no genuine partnership, only an endless campaign of emotional firefighting that leaves both parties exhausted, stuck in a perpetual storm of apprehension and doubt. If, however, you find that she does recognize her patterns and genuinely attempts to address them, seeking professional help, working on self-awareness, and respecting your legitimate need for individual space, then the relationship might still evolve into something resilient and beautiful. That evolution hinges on her willingness to face the root of her fears rather than relying on you to endlessly reassure them away. Through such a collaborative process, you might construct a stronger bond rooted in mutual understanding. But absent that willingness, you're left with a stark choice: remain in the emotional quicksand or climb out before it swallows your sense of self entirely. Ultimately, the line between caring deeply and sacrificing yourself can be perilously thin. A Stoic man aims to walk this line with clarity. He offers compassion but does not become a martyr to another's insecurities. He honors the principle that, while love can be many things, patient, supportive, uplifting, it cannot be a never-ending funnel for someone else's unhealed trauma. Love's true power lies in nurturing growth in both partners, not in stifling one under the weight of the other's constant dread. And so, if you are entangled with an insecure clinger who cannot, or will not, acknowledge her responsibility for her own emotional landscape, the harsh truth is that you may never find the peace, freedom, and mutual enrichment you seek. Recognizing this, you uphold your own dignity and emotional well-being, preserving the potential for a healthier, more balanced connection, whether with her, if she truly commits to change, or with someone else whose heart is ready to meet yours on equal footing. Chapter 5. The Overly Independent. Independence is undeniably appealing. A woman who stands on her own 2 feet, crafts her own path in life, and moves through the world with assurance is captivating. There's a magnetic quality in her self-reliance. You see someone who doesn't need constant approval, who won't crumble without continuous reassurance. In a world where many people seem perpetually caught in cycles of codependency, her capacity to remain solidly rooted in her own worth is a breath of fresh air. But there's a subtle tipping point where genuine independence mutates into emotional isolation, and the once alluring "I can handle everything myself" attitude becomes a barrier, one that blocks any meaningful connection you try to create. From the outset, you might interpret her aloofness as simple caution or healthy boundaries. Perhaps she's experienced heartbreak or betrayal in the past, so she's diligent about whom she trusts. You admire that restraint. You tell yourself it shows strength, that she's not going to make you or anyone else the center of her universe. On paper, it's admirable. She has her own goals, her own social circle, and an established life that doesn't revolve around winning someone's affection. She doesn't pepper you with incessant questions about your feelings, nor does she need you to solve her problems. It feels refreshing that she doesn't lean on you for every little thing. Yet as you get to know her better, you discover that her independence isn't just about taking care of herself, it's also about denying any possibility that she might ever need another person, even in a small way. The walls she has constructed are so tall and so thick that there's no path for you to walk alongside her. She's convinced that leaning on anyone for emotional or practical help equals dependency, which in her mind is synonymous with weakness. Rather than trusting a partner to support her when she needs it, she'd rather operate entirely solo, even at the expense of true intimacy. You see it in the small moments. You might offer to help her with something as trivial as carrying groceries or fixing a minor problem at home. She refuses, not kindly, but with a pointed firmness that suggests your offer infringes on her identity. Any gesture of care, however heartfelt, is perceived as a threat to the fortress of autonomy she's built. Offer her emotional support when she's clearly upset, and she'll wave it off or reply with a curt "I'm fine," which is code for "I don't want to discuss this, especially not with you." Try sharing how you feel about her, your admiration, your concern, or your love, and she responds by changing the subject or subtly deflecting. She views vulnerability, on your part or hers, as an erosion of the self-sufficiency she holds so dear. In the beginning, you may rationalize her reactions. Perhaps she's been hurt badly before. Perhaps she needs time to realize you're safe. But as the relationship progresses, a pattern emerges. Your presence is never genuinely welcome beyond a surface level. You're allowed into her life only to the extent that you don't threaten her image of being entirely self-contained. If you inquire too deeply about her feelings or motives, she shuts you out. If you try to be there for her when she's having a rough day, she dismisses your concern, sometimes even mocking you for thinking she can't handle it. Over time, it becomes clear that this isn't just caution, this is a firm refusal to ever share herself deeply. Gradually, you begin to feel unnecessary. She makes it evident, either through her words or actions, that your contributions are optional at best and intrusive at worst. She doesn't ask for your thoughts when making big decisions. She doesn't confide in you about her fears, insecurities, or hopes for the future. In essence, you serve no real emotional function in her life. While most people in relationships appreciate having a partner to lean on, or even just to celebrate milestones with, she views your desire to help or share in her experiences as a fundamental misunderstanding of who she is. You start to wonder why you're there at all if she not only doesn't need you, but doesn't seem to want any form of genuine companionship. The truth is, genuine relationships require an exchange of vulnerability. This doesn't mean clinging to each other every second or dissolving into codependency. But it does mean opening up, admitting you can't do everything alone, and letting your partner see where you're strong and where you struggle. Real intimacy is built when both people are willing to trust each other with their imperfections. It's in those moments where you say, "I need you right now," or "I'm here for you if you need me." If one partner habitually rejects any form of support or closeness, the relationship becomes a facade, two individuals standing in proximity rather than forging a shared life. A woman who is excessively independent views this dynamic differently. She sees the emotional give and take of a relationship as a battlefield. In her mind, the moment she admits to needing someone, she's conceding defeat. She interprets emotional reliance, however small, as a blow to her dignity and autonomy. So, she remains guarded, never allowing you a glimpse into her genuine thoughts or feelings, and never granting you the chance to be her refuge. This mindset not only isolates her, but also denies you the opportunity to experience the true depth of partnership. Inevitably, resentment can creep in. You find yourself asking, "Why am I here? Is there a meaningful role for me in her life?" Over and over, you might attempt to break through her defenses, do something thoughtful, plan an experience that might encourage closeness, or simply let her know you're there for her. But these efforts are either minimized or met with irritation. The unspoken message is, "I don't need you, and I don't want to need you." When it becomes a recurrent theme, you realize there's little room for you to participate in any substantive way. A Stoic man, grounded in his sense of self-worth, will not keep banging on a locked door. He understands the difference between respecting someone's boundaries and subjecting himself to emotional exile. Stoicism isn't about apathy or rejecting connection. It's about clarity, balance, and recognizing what you can and cannot control. You cannot force someone to lower their walls. You cannot argue them into understanding that healthy relationships involve interdependence. If she interprets every friendly gesture as an infringement on her autonomy, it reveals her deep-seated inability or unwillingness to differentiate between helpful support and stifling dependence. A Stoic man also recognizes that love should never be a one-sided pursuit. He does not beg for a place in someone's life. He does not audition endlessly for the role of significant other when the other person has already decided to remain distant. If she genuinely sees partnership as a power struggle or a potential loss of control, then love ceases to be a collaborative journey. Instead, it becomes an uneasy standoff, one where you perpetually feel like you're on trial for crimes of caring too much. The essence of a healthy partnership is mutual reliance, not unhealthy dependency. Two strong individuals each bring value, perspective, and support to the relationship. Sometimes you carry each other through hard times, sometimes you celebrate one another's wins. But always, you respect each other's capacity to stand alone, even as you willingly stand together. True independence isn't about erecting walls so tall that no one can see over them. It's about knowing you have the strength to be on your own and still choosing to let the right person in. A woman who grasps real independence can accept help without reading it as a statement on her worth. She understands that leaning on someone in a challenging moment doesn't negate her resilience. She's secure enough in herself to know that no single act of partnership will rob her of the identity she has built. In fact, she sees authentic connection as an asset, something that enhances life rather than diminishes her capabilities. She freely gives and receives emotional support, understanding that interdependence enhances both partners without rendering either one powerless. If a woman can't comprehend this, no amount of persuasion or patience on your part will break through. She will continue to view shared vulnerability as a threat, seeing closeness as a compromise of her identity rather than a source of enrichment. Over time, you will remain locked out, left with nothing but frustration and the nagging sense that you are not truly wanted or needed. The longer you stay in such a dynamic, the more you compromise your own sense of worth, endlessly trying to prove something to a person who has already decided she doesn't need anyone. A Stoic man acknowledges when a situation cannot progress toward mutual understanding. He respects his own boundaries and emotional well-being by choosing not to remain where he's not fully embraced. He doesn't sulk or become bitter. He simply recognizes that a relationship devoid of any genuine interdependence is little more than a casual acquaintance with romantic undertones. It fails to offer the deep bond of trust that genuine love requires. Thus, if she insists on pushing you away, if she consistently interprets your kindness as an insult, your concern as an overreach, and your attempts at closeness as an intrusion, then the healthiest course of action is to walk away. You can't twist someone's arm into letting you in, and it's not your responsibility to tear down the fortress they've constructed around themselves. Your responsibility is to maintain your integrity and emotional health. Remember, love should not feel like a repeated test of endurance in the face of persistent rejection. It should not leave you guessing whether you're welcome or question your role in the partnership. When a woman makes it clear she will never allow you close enough to share her life meaningfully, she is showing you how little she values the full spectrum of what real love can be. And a man who understands his own value and embraces a philosophy that cherishes emotional equilibrium will not persist in a relationship built on stone walls and locked doors. Ultimately, you deserve to be with someone who values both your independence and your desire for genuine closeness, someone who sees interdependence as a choice made by two capable individuals who want to enrich each other's lives. If her brand of independence means shutting you out entirely, refusing the emotional mutuality that defines true partnership, then you already know this is not a bond that can flourish. True independence doesn't reject love, it complements it. And if she doesn't see that, no amount of waiting, coaxing, or reasoning can make it otherwise. Stand firm in your principles. Recognize that real strength, whether it belongs to you or to her, involves the courage to be open, to be seen, and to trust in another person's care. If she insists on treating relationship closeness as a battle she must never lose, walk away with your self-respect intact. Somewhere out there is a woman who comprehends that vulnerability and autonomy are not contradictions, but partners in the dance of authentic, enriching love. Let yourself seek that kind of connection and leave behind the closed doors that serve only to keep you locked out. Chapter 6. The Label Chaser. She doesn't love you for the nuances of your character or the depths of your personality. What she truly craves is the sheen of prestige you can place on her life, the refined restaurants, the exclusive getaways, the designer handbags, and the envy that sparks in the eyes of onlookers when they see how she's living her best life. From the moment she lays eyes on you, she's evaluating whether you can boost her status and grant her the material indulgences she dreams of. You might not notice this at first. After all, early interactions can feel flirtatious, even exciting. She might ask casual questions about where you work, where you travel, or what your interests are, questions that seem innocuous but are, in fact, calculated probes to gauge how well you can support her appetite for opulence. Eventually, the pattern emerges. She's not drawn to your humor, your values, or your aspirations in any meaningful way. She's drawn to the privileges you can open up to her, the version of the good life she believes you might fund. This mindset becomes all the more evident once she realizes you have the means, or the potential, to support her craving for the high end. Suddenly, she inserts subtle remarks about top-tier experiences she's always wanted. Perhaps she casually brings up a new luxury spa that just opened, or an upscale boutique that sells items she's had her eye on, or the international vacation destinations that any serious couple should visit at least once. In the beginning, you may interpret these comments as harmless fantasies. Maybe you, too, enjoy the occasional splurge. But as her remarks grow more pointed, you sense an undercurrent of expectation. It's no coincidence she glorifies luxury goods and elevated experiences at every turn. Slowly, she positions these desires as benchmarks of a proper relationship, equating financial provision with emotional investment. Her social media presence provides an even clearer window into her true priorities. You'll notice that her feeds are flooded with meticulously curated photos, each frame designed to accentuate the aura of a lavish lifestyle. She might post images of fancy brunches, exotic travels, and carefully posed shots at high-end stores, all accompanied by captions that walk a tightrope between casual boasting and humble bragging. She's cultivated an audience that applauds her glamorous outings, and she's grown addicted to the validation it brings. Yet behind every photo is a subtext: I'm worthy of this level of luxury, and anyone who chooses to be with me must keep me in this realm, or elevate me even further. In conversation, she portrays these indulgences as norms, what she's grown accustomed to or what she deserves, as though a high-end lifestyle is an inalienable right. If you dare suggest a simpler alternative, a cozy night at home, a stroll through a local park, or a modest restaurant that focuses on quality rather than fame, she may display overt disappointment or pepper her response with condescending undertones. She might say something like, "That's nice, but it's not really my vibe," or "I guess we could do that if there's absolutely nothing more exciting going on." Her repeated message is that ordinary pleasures are beneath her lofty sense of self, and that you, as her partner, must constantly strive to meet a standard of extravagance. Over time, this pattern stretches beyond a mere preference for luxury. It reveals a deep-seated value system where appearances reign supreme. Perhaps she'll make offhand comments about how so-and-so's boyfriend just upgraded her car, or how another couple she knows posted photos from a 5-star beach resort. She'll frame these anecdotes in a way that highlights how real men treat their partners, implying that if you are unwilling or unable to replicate such gestures, you're somehow not fulfilling your role. She's effectively staking out the boundaries of your dynamic. If you want her continued affection, you must play the part of a high-rolling benefactor, or else face her disappointment. If you manage to keep pace with these unending demands, you might see moments of her satisfaction, fleeting bursts of gratitude when you present her with the designer purse she's been eyeing or book the exclusive vacation she's been hinting about. She'll likely flaunt these gifts in person and online, gushing about how lucky she is and briefly showering you with praise. Yet pay attention, These moments of appreciation are typically short-lived. The moment that brand new handbag becomes yesterday's news, she sets her sights on something else, a pricier accessory, a more exotic destination, or a bigger statement piece to dazzle her social circle. Any attempt to take a breather from spending is met with raised eyebrows or insinuations that your love must be waning if you're not willing to keep indulging her whims. Gradually, you might feel an unsettling hollowness in your interactions. Conversations revolve around her wants, the next social event she wants to attend, ideally wearing a dress you bankroll, the next photo op worthy of Instagram, or the next big gift that will prove your devotion. What's missing? Genuine curiosity about your day, your joys, your struggles, and your personal goals that fall outside the scope of material success. She might feign interest in your career only to gauge how well it can sustain her desired lifestyle. And if you start to scale back on lavish spending, maybe because you're focusing on long-term investments, saving for a home, or simply rebalancing your financial priorities, she may begin to question your ambition or complain about backsliding from the lifestyle she's grown accustomed to. You may also notice her disinterest in any facet of life that doesn't bolster her curated public image. For instance, if you suggest volunteering or engaging in community activities that aren't glitzy, she'll brush it aside. If you talk about deeper emotional needs or philosophical topics, anything that doesn't intersect with luxury, she'll tune out. Her measure of fulfillment is dictated by how impressive something appears from the outside, not by the intrinsic value or meaningful connection it might offer. If a pursuit doesn't translate into an Instagrammable moment or a stepping stone toward greater status, she finds it dull or unimportant. Over time, this takes a toll on your emotional well-being. You may begin to wonder if she cares about you at all or if she merely values the lifestyle package you present. You might reflect on the times you shared personal victories, ones unrelated to finances, and realize she offered little more than a patronizing "that's nice." You notice how quickly she loses interest in moments that lack the glimmer of prestige, and how her face lights up only when the conversation shifts back to acquisitions, fancy experiences, or comparisons with others who live large. A creeping suspicion grows. What if your love, your loyalty, and your thoughtful gestures mean far less to her than your ability to fund her glossy narrative? A Stoic man, grounded in self-awareness and personal responsibility, finds such a relationship untenable. Stoicism advocates a clear-eyed view of what truly matters: virtue, integrity, emotional maturity, and the cultivation of inner tranquility. In contrast, the label chaser is mesmerized by external trappings, brand labels, luxurious outings, and the admiration of those who see her social media feed. She invests almost no effort in deeper emotional bonds or shared growth. For a Stoic, the dissonance is stark. A commitment founded on credit card statements and brand worship is doomed to be both shallow and draining. Consider the practical implications. If she is only as present or affectionate as your budget allows, then your relationship is at the mercy of external factors beyond your full control. Economic downturns happen. Careers shift. Personal goals evolve. A wise individual knows that money can come and go, and investing one's sense of self in an ever-fluctuating resource is precarious. If her devotion hinges on your ability to continually meet her escalating demands, the moment you can't, or choose not to, she will be out the door, hunting for the next benefactor whose wallet is deeper. While heartbreak is always possible in any relationship, a transactional arrangement such as this makes it almost inevitable. There's no real loyalty, just a business-like contract disguised as romance. She offers the image of love so long as you provide her the luxury she craves. It may also dawn on you that she's never satisfied. Even if you stretch your finances to take her on a lavish trip or splurge on an outrageously expensive designer bag, that satisfaction only holds her attention for a brief window. She might post excitedly about it, revel in the likes, and even gush to her friends about how wonderful you are. But as soon as that novelty fades, she's fixated on the next object of desire, complaining that her current possessions are so last season or that she's bored with the usual restaurants. Meanwhile, you're left chasing her approval, wondering if you'll ever reach a plateau where she's content. The truth is, you won't, because her self-esteem is rooted in external validation. It's never a well that can be filled, no matter how much you pour into it. Another telling indicator is how she interacts with your social circle, especially those who don't share her taste for extravagance. She may show a pronounced lack of interest or even outright disdain for friends who aren't living what she considers an elevated life. If your close companion drives an older car or lives in a modest apartment, she might subtly belittle them, questioning why they settle for less. You begin to see how her sense of community is filtered through a lens of status. Can they help her climb higher or introduce her to more influential circles? If not, she finds them irrelevant or unworthy of her time, ignoring the genuine kindness or loyalty such friends might offer. Meanwhile, your own values clash with this relentless push for upscale living. You might value saving for a secure future, investing in experiences that enrich the soul rather than just the image, or supporting charitable causes that resonate with your principles. She interprets these choices as evidence of your lack of ambition or unwillingness to step up. Subtly, or sometimes not so subtly, she pressures you to align with her worldview, dismissing your financial wisdom or philanthropic leanings as naive, all while painting her perpetual quest for brand-based validation as the more sophisticated way to live. In doing so, she diminishes the essence of what matters to you, steering the relationship into a territory that is both manipulative and demeaning. A Stoic man cannot thrive under such conditions. With self-respect rooted in inner virtue rather than outward displays, he recognizes that no human connection can be fulfilling if it revolves around inflated expectations and materialistic showmanship. He acknowledges that genuine intimacy requires the willingness to see each other's flaws, dreams, and anxieties in a deeper sense, not just the curated glam on display for the world. He also knows that real commitment entails weathering life's storms together, something the label chaser has little interest in doing unless those storms involve a sumptuous travel destination or an Instagram-worthy resort. Eventually, you confront the stark reality: if your financial priorities shift, if you no longer can or wish to support her lavish tastes, she'll vanish from your life. She won't stay because of emotional closeness, mutual respect, or any intangible bond that might hold a more authentic couple together in times of adversity. She'll leave to find someone else better suited to funnel money into her lifestyle. That's not love, it's a financial arrangement dressed up in the language of romance. To stay in such a scenario means signing up for chronic emotional dissatisfaction and a persistent worry that tomorrow she might look for a better deal. This kind of arrangement can corrode your self-esteem and emotional health, too. Each time she insinuates that your efforts aren't enough, you face a dilemma: cave to her pressure or stand your ground. If you cave, you sink further into a dynamic where you're more of a benefactor than a partner. If you stand your ground, she becomes resentful and might threaten to find someone else who knows how to treat her right. Both outcomes lead to the realization that your relationship is essentially a negotiation about money and status. It's a far cry from the emotional support, mutual comfort, and shared journey that a healthy partnership provides. Yet it's not uncommon for people to remain in such relationships far longer than is wise, often due to denial or wishful thinking. In quieter moments, she might pretend to appreciate the little things you do. She might even say she respects who you are. But pay close attention to her actions over the long term. They'll show a consistent pattern: ephemeral gratitude if you meet her material expectations, sharp disappointment or disdain when you don't. Over weeks and months, that cycle leaves little doubt: her loyalty is to the extravagant lifestyle, not to you. Meanwhile, you're sacrificing your own financial stability, your peace of mind, and your emotional resources to keep a facade afloat. A Stoic man eventually recognizes there is no point in persisting with illusions. He remains compassionate, understanding that such a woman might be driven by deep-rooted insecurities and an unhealthy fixation on external validation. However, he also understands that it's not his responsibility to bankroll or enable those insecurities. He values the simplicity and honesty of a connection where each person strives for personal growth and shares the fruits of that growth freely, not as a lever for control or as a measure of worth. Walking away from the label chaser can feel oddly complex, especially if she has entwined her life with yours by proclaiming affection or even throwing in phrases like "I love you" whenever she wants an especially extravagant indulgence. Guilt or second thoughts may arise. Am I being too harsh? Or could she learn to value deeper things if I just hold on longer? But genuine transformation requires her own introspection, a willingness to strip away the facade of material obsession, and a readiness to embrace a more meaningful approach to relationships. If she's not actively demonstrating those steps, any hope you harbor is simply another extension of wishful thinking. Yet the long-term benefits of disengaging far exceed the temporary discomfort. By stepping back, you reclaim your autonomy and financial agency, refocusing your energies on pursuits that align with your values, be it building a sound future, exploring personal passions, or investing emotionally in people who value you beyond what's in your wallet. You free yourself from the anxiety of constantly needing to impress or keep up appearances, and you open space in your life for a partnership that cherishes sincerity, mutual respect, and personal growth. In the end, the relationship was never about love in the true sense. It was about polishing her public image, subsidizing her desire for high-profile living, and feeding her endless quest for admiration. Once you see the truth, it becomes clear that there's no stable foundation for a deep, authentic bond. A Stoic man does not conflate superficial adoration of labels and status with genuine connection. He understands that no amount of looking the part can replicate the richness of a partnership built on shared values, empathy, and real emotional presence. Remember, a woman who truly adores you will care about your well-being, your ambitions, your challenges, and the everyday joys that don't cost a fortune. She'll be proud to stand beside you in life's simple moments, not just the polished, Instagram-perfect ones. She'll celebrate your successes that come without a designer label, and she won't measure the depth of your love by the extravagance of your gifts. Instead, she'll relish the intangible bonds that form from honest conversation, heartfelt laughter, and mutual support, even when the world isn't watching. So if you find yourself entangled with someone whose primary affection hinges on the stature of your wallet, heed it as a glaring warning sign. The moment you suspect your worth is being tallied through price tags and brand names, pause and assess: are you in a partnership or playing the role of a benefactor? Are you seeking to connect on a soul level or merely underwriting a lifestyle? If the answers to these questions leave you unsettled, it's likely time to let go. A Stoic man prizes his self-respect too highly to mortgage it for someone else's fleeting adoration of status. He has the clarity to see when a relationship has devolved into a transaction and the fortitude to walk away from anything that compromises his inner harmony. And that is the final truth. If she is obsessed with the label more than she values your genuine companionship, no brand or budget can bridge the gulf separating you. It's an illusion of love, grand in appearance, but barren at its core. Better to invest your energies in a future where bonds are formed by mutual appreciation for who you each are, not what you can buy. By stepping away, you reaffirm that your life's worth and your love cannot be itemized on a price tag, no matter how prestigious the brand. Chapter 7. The Narcissist. She orders her world so that everything bends to her will, her whims, and her shifting moods, as if every day must be scripted around her desires and every relationship must pay homage to her sense of entitlement. Even small conversations feel transactional, loaded with an underlying expectation that you cater to her demands or face the consequences. What she wants is unwavering admiration, an audience that never questions her judgment and rushes to satisfy her every need. If she perceives any sign of hesitation, she employs a carefully orchestrated arsenal of silent treatments, cold indifference, or thinly veiled accusations, each crafted to make you doubt yourself. At first, you feel almost honored by her spotlight, as though she's chosen you above others. Her praise initially feels like a precious gift, igniting a spark of excitement that perhaps she sees in you a special quality everyone else has overlooked. But beneath that compliment-laden facade lies an expectation that you revolve your existence around her, surrendering your peace in exchange for her fleeting approval. The early charm she radiates can be disorienting. She carries an air of confidence that draws people toward her orbit. Her stories drip with embellished details, making even trivial events seem grandiose. She may draw you in with talk of grand adventures or insistent praise of your talents, so you feel uniquely recognized. Yet as time passes, you discover her apparent warmth is entirely conditional. The moment you prioritize a personal goal or indulge in a small freedom, like spending an evening with friends, she views it as defiance, and her response is often swift. She might send a barrage of guilt-inducing messages, accusing you of insensitivity or neglect. Or she might shut down entirely, creating a tense atmosphere where you're left guessing what you did wrong. In this dynamic, the only way to restore any semblance of harmony is to appease her, to prove over and over that you place her at the center of your universe. It's exhausting, and yet you fall into the cycle in the desperate hope of regaining even a trace of that early affection. Perhaps the most formidable aspect of her personality is her refusal to accept any blame, ever. No matter how glaring the evidence against her, she shifts the focus onto someone else, often you. You might calmly present a list of valid concerns or specific examples of her destructive behavior. Rather than reflecting on her part in the issue, she deftly accuses you of overreacting or being selfish. She's a master at rewriting reality to ensure that she always comes out as either the aggrieved party or the benevolent savior who's surrounded by ungrateful people. Little by little, you start questioning your own perspective. Maybe you really were too harsh. Maybe you truly are overlooking her feelings. This is precisely the headspace she wants you in, where you're too busy defending yourself or catering to her emotional whims to realize you've been pulled into a labyrinth of her making. In the first phase of the relationship, you might interpret her intensity as devotion. She showered you with compliments you never heard before, zeroed in on your ambitions or background, and made you feel like the most fascinating person in the room. But that initial euphoria quickly diminishes, replaced by her ever-evolving list of criticisms and expectations. She questions why you speak with certain friends, or she critiques your family's role in your life, insinuating that they distract you from her. She finds fault in how you spend your free time, or even how you dress, implying that any autonomy on your part is a sign of disloyalty. Over time, you begin to doubt your own competency to maintain a meaningful relationship, as if you must be missing something fundamental if you can't measure up to her extensive demands. You try to smooth things out, perhaps by modifying your social circle or re-evaluating your hobbies. You tell yourself that these concessions are minor if they keep the peace. But the truth is, every time you meet one demand, a new one emerges. The underlying message is consistent. She expects you to exist in her shadow, diminishing your individuality so she can shine without rivalry. In her world, there is little room for your separate interests, aspirations, or even your emotional needs, unless they are aligned with her desires. You might notice that when you bring up a personal struggle, she swiftly redirects the conversation back to herself. Her insensitivity to your well-being is not accidental. It ensures you remain focused on her drama rather than your own. The real danger lies in how easily you can lose yourself in her vortex of manipulation. Her pattern of behavior can be so disorienting, moments of warmth or even grand romantic gestures are interspersed with cruel dismissals or silent treatments. She stretches your emotional elasticity to its limit, cycling between sweetness and venom. In your more vulnerable moments, you might convince yourself that if you just do a bit more, love her harder, be more understanding, she'll settle into a healthier pattern. But with a true narcissist, your appeasement feeds her appetite, rather than quelling it. Far from bringing harmony, each act of surrender often emboldens her to push further, to see how many more of your boundaries she can tear down. Given enough time in this environment, the toll on your self-esteem becomes profound. You second-guess your judgment, torn between the traces of warmth she occasionally shows and the hostility that follows if she feels even slightly slighted. The endless strain of adapting yourself to her evolving moods cultivates a quiet desperation. You begin to see how much mental real estate her demands occupy. Tasks that once brought you joy seem overshadowed by an undercurrent of anxiety. How will she react if you spend an evening painting or writing instead of catering to her? Even the thought of your own growth or ambitions prompts guilt, as though you're doing something selfish. With each concession, you relinquish more of your sense of self until you can scarcely recall who you were before meeting her. Yet Stoicism provides a beacon, a reminder that you are responsible for the regulation of your own emotions and for protecting your core principles. You come to realize that appeasing a narcissist is an endless, fruitless road. Stoicism doesn't teach you to shun empathy entirely, but it does warn against sacrificing your well-being at the altar of another person's insatiable ego. Authentic partnership is a two-way street where each partner acknowledges the other's individuality and respects healthy boundaries. It's built on mutual uplift, not a constant drain on one person's emotional reserves. A narcissistic relationship, by contrast, is inherently unbalanced, demanding everything from you while offering little true support in return. Eventually, the only real route to recovery and self-preservation is a decisive break. Walking away is far more than a physical act, it's a psychological and emotional reclamation of who you are. The web she's spun around you may feel difficult to escape, especially if you've been entangled for a long time, but the moment you decide to leave, you start to disentangle yourself from the manipulations that have distorted your sense of reality. It may hurt, because she'll interpret your departure as yet another wound to her pride. She might accuse you of abandoning her or being ungrateful, twisting the narrative to suit her victim-hero complex. But you must remember that her accusations are part of the machinery she wields to control you. In those first days or weeks after you break away, pangs of guilt or doubt may attack you. You might recall her early flattery, wondering if you misjudged her potential or gave up prematurely. Yet a more objective look clarifies that she never truly sought a balanced, loving bond. She was chasing an endless supply of attention and submission, with no intention of meeting you halfway. Embracing your independence doesn't make you cruel or unfeeling, rather, it reaffirms that real love doesn't require the complete forfeiture of your individuality. Freed from her constant emotional demands, you can finally breathe, rediscovering the person you were before your time together. You start making decisions based on your values, not her unpredictable moods. You reconnect with old friends and passions you'd placed on hold. Little by little, your self-esteem rebuilds, and you see that your worth was never determined by her endless critique or fleeting praise. You also learn a valuable lesson about the importance of setting boundaries and recognizing red flags early. The magnetic pull of superficial charm can mask a deeply toxic dynamic if you're not vigilant. When all is said and done, it's clear that staying in a narcissist's orbit means resigning yourself to a permanent state of emotional servitude. She will not be appeased by your devotion. Indeed, the more you comply, the more she demands. In contrast, stepping away is a bold affirmation that your life can't be consumed by another person's vanity. Although walking away often brings short-term discomfort, memories of the initial enchantment, and a sense of regret, you gain immeasurable long-term peace. Moreover, you preserve your capacity to engage in a healthy, equitable relationship down the road, one rooted in a genuine exchange of respect and caring. In the grand scheme, love should never be a tool for control, nor should it condemn you to the role of perpetual fixer and flatterer. It's designed to be a partnership of two people who encourage each other's growth, offer compassion in times of hardship, and celebrate triumphs together. A narcissist sabotages this possibility from the outset, twisting every caring act into a validation of her unquenchable ego. Recognizing that fact is the first step toward freeing yourself from her grip. Ultimately, by choosing to depart from her world, you safeguard your integrity, self-worth, and emotional stability. It's not just about escaping a negative situation, it's about affirming who you are without bending to someone's endless demands. The Stoic path reminds you that your tranquility is not a commodity to be surrendered for someone else's insatiable hunger for praise. In leaving her behind, you pave the way for genuine connection elsewhere, a connection founded on balanced reciprocity and a shared commitment to nurturing each other's well-being, rather than draining one partner's spirit to elevate the other's ego. Some women will destroy you without you even realizing it until it's too late. They don't use fists or weapons. They use emotional gains, manipulation, and slow psychological erosion to make you doubt yourself, drain your energy, and waste your time. But a Stoic man is not blind. He sees the signs early, and he acts decisively. Never stay in a situation that kills your peace, your confidence, or your purpose. The right woman will build you up, not tear you down. And the moment you recognize the difference, your entire life will change. If this video helped you, like, subscribe, and share your story in the comments. Now go forward with clarity and never let anyone destroy you again.